So Scottish independence, as Brexit gets nearer, Scottish independence is talked about more and more. There's the people up in Scotland are quite left wing. It's kind of this weird thing where they don't like being governed by British. You can't say the English because there isn't even an English parliament anyway, but they don't like being governed by Westminster, but they want to be governed by Brussels. They don't like this tier of government here, but they want an even larger tier of government up here. They want the highest possible level of government. It really doesn't care about anybody. The EU's already shown that with its treatment of Ireland. It doesn't really care about any nation state. But there's this quite perverse situation in Scotland, where they don't want to be ruled by Westminster, but they want to be ruled by Brussels. Now, that's fine. I'm happy with whatever the Scottish people want to do. If they want to have a second referendum and they want to leave the United Kingdom, and no doubt they would want to join the EU, because a sovereign state of Scotland on its own would really struggle. It would really want the protection of being in the EU. But how's this going to work? Let's just look at some numbers. So the Government Expenditure and Revenue Scotland compile data every year. This data set's from the year 2017 to 2018. Now, Scotland's deficit, if you include the GDP of Scotland itself, this includes all the money they get from North Sea oil and the oil industry and the gas industry. This includes everything. This is the total GDP of Scotland. They still run a £13.4 billion deficit after they've collected all the tax receipts for oil and gas and everything else in the economy. Public spending still runs at a deficit of £13.44 billion a year. Now, Scotland's economy isn't particularly big. It's not particularly big, so a deficit of 13.4 billion puts them at a deficit at 7.9% of GDP a year, which is insane. That's insane. Like, the EU rules are 3% a year, and if 3% is still high. The UK deficit as a whole is about 1.9%. The UK as a whole, that includes Scotland, that includes reckless Scotland, is 1.9% of GDP a year. Scotland's running a deficit of about 7.9%. That is insane. How does Scotland ever plan on funding itself when you're running a 7.9% GDP deficit? Now, they talk about the Union Dividend. This is how much better off each Scot is per year being part of the United Kingdom because of the transfer of wealth from England, namely the southeast to north of the border. The Union Dividend equates, once you take in how much more is spent per Scot than anybody else in the United Kingdom, and Scots also pay a lower amount of tax. So the Union Dividend works out to £1,882 per year. So Scots are better off by £1,882 per capita. That's each Scot, baby, man, woman, pensioner, each one of them is better off by £1,882 a year. So I'm not against Scottish independence. I really believe that people should be governed at the lowest possible level of government. Even like England's too big. It should be devolved to like regional powers. It should be like county powers, a bit like how the original inception of America was. They realised that government needs to be run at the lowest possible level because the closer government is to the citizens that are voting, the more likely it is to be fair. The EU doesn't care about anybody because they're in their ivory towers in Brussels, in Strasbourg. They don't care about people in Ireland, in England, in Scotland because they're too far removed from it. But if you had a local level of politics, county level, you could meet the person that's running your county and talk to them one-on-one. But you can't do that with national governments, and especially you can't do it with the EU. But Scotland's essentially going to be bankrupt. If it decided to leave, you can't run a 7.9% of GDP deficit per year. When the UK sells a bond, a 30-year bond, 30-year gilt, it can fund that at 1.7% interest rates. No way could Scotland could sell bonds at 1.7% on a 30-year bond. There's no way that Scotland could do that. Interest rates in Scotland would be through the roof. When they sell bonds to raise money for whatever projects Scottish people want to do, they're probably selling 30. They probably wouldn't even sell 30-year bonds. They probably do very short-term bonds just to try and get it a bit cheaper. But they'd be looking at like 4, 5, 6%, maybe 7, 8%. They'd be looking at paying the same rate on debt as countries that consistently go bankrupt, like Greece, like Turkey, like Italy, these sort of countries, they pay a lot more on their interest. They pay even more because the market wouldn't trust Scotland. The market wouldn't trust Scotland. So it's an interesting one where Scotland goes with this independence thing. I support them in leaving. It will raise living standards in England for a start because there'll be more tax revenue to spend on England that won't be squandered north of the border. And long term, it might work for the Scottish people, but there'll definitely be a short time where it's going to be very problematic. There's going to be a 10, 15-year window where it's going to be very problematic while they restructure, while they realise they can't raise money in the bond markets, while the economy literally collapses. But it'd be an interesting one anyway. It's interesting how Scotland still think this is a good idea. None of the numbers add up at all. They don't add up at all. Like a 5-year-old can see the numbers don't add up for Scotland. But, Nicola Sturgeon's got a lot of power up there. The Scottish people seem to largely want it. There's a big enough percentage of people that want to do it. If there was a second referendum, they could swing it. They could swing it, in my opinion. But, maybe it could work for everybody. It'd be good for England, lower taxes, and maybe long term, maybe in 20 years' time, Scotland could pick itself up by its bootstraps and maybe make things work. And if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do.